SpaceX's Polaris Dawn, more than a space tourism vanity project. The mission has actual risk and actual science as it looks to break spaceflight records. This Boeing Starliner returned to Earth early on the morning of Saturday, September 7th, when it successfully landed at the White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico. It made this successful return, but due to ongoing issues, it returned to Earth unmanned, leaving its two-person crew of Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams stranded aboard the International Space Station to return on SpaceX's Crew Dragon at the end of the Crew 9 mission scheduled for February 2025. Over the summer, SpaceX experienced two unexpected mishaps. On July 11th, after delivering its payload, the second stage of a Falcon 9 exploded due to an oxygen leak during the Starlink 9-3 flight. On August 28th, during a Starlink 8-6 mission, a landing leg broke, destroying the first stage of booster B-1062. The payload successfully made it to orbit, but SpaceX had two Falcon 9 failures in 2 months, and it is a reminder of the danger of space travel that carries a 3% chance of death to a crew. Despite this, SpaceX and its Crew Dragon, on top of a Falcon 9 rocket, will attempt one of the most ambitious and dangerous missions since Apollo. On Monday, September 9th, SpaceX plans to launch its Polaris Dawn mission from Florida's Kennedy Space Center Launch Complex 39A, also known as LC-39A. This will be the third attempt to launch the mission following delays on August 27th due to a helium leak, and again on August 28th due to expected unfavorable weather in the recovery zone on its return 5 days later. Polaris Dawn is a private space flight that does not involve NASA in either crew or mission. SpaceX will manage the mission on behalf of Shift 4 CEO Jared Isaacman, marking Crew Dragon's 14th manned flight. Polaris Dawn will be the first of 3 scheduled flights under what is called the Polaris program. Jared Isaacman, then 16 years old, founded Shift 4, or Shift 4 Payments, Inc., a Pennsylvania-based American payment processor in the year 1999. The company processes payments for over 200,000 businesses in the U.S., Canada, and Europe. Jared Isaacman is still the CEO of the company despite it going public on the New York Stock Exchange in 2021, and he has an estimated worth of $2 billion. Mr. Isaacman is in charge of securing funding for the projected $52 million cost of the Polaris Dawn mission. In exchange for this payment, he has been awarded the title as commander and is expected to perform the majority of the spacecraft's flying because he is an experienced pilot. This is the second commercial flight, with the other being in 2021 on SpaceX Inspiration 4 flight. Isaacman at the time donated $100 million to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in exchange for being on the 2021 spaceflight crew. 3 rookie astronauts, all with no prior experience in government spaceflight, will accompany Mr. Isaacman. Scott Poteet, a former United States Air Force fighter pilot, will be the pilot and the backup to Mr. Isaacman. Mission Specialist Sarah Gillis, a SpaceX Senior Space Operations Engineer, and Mission Specialist and Medical Officer Anna Menon, who is SpaceX's lead space operation and mission director. Ms. Menon also has 6 years of experience with NASA as a biomedical flight controller. The Polaris Dawn mission has many firsts for both commercial and spaceflight in general. The mission will test the limits of the Falcon 9 booster and the Crew Dragon, as it will attempt to reach the highest orbit ever achieved in human spaceflight, and will be at an altitude not seen since Project Gemini in the 1960s and Project Apollo in the 1960s and 1970s. The goal is to reach an altitude of 870 miles or 1,400 kilometers and break the previous Apogee record of Gemini 11 of 853 miles or 1,373 kilometers that was set in September 1966. This is an orbit that is 3 times higher than the International Space Station's orbit. The Apollo missions did achieve higher orbits, but those were lunar flights rather than Earth orbit flights. During this altitude flight, the Polaris Dawn crew will traverse the Van Allen radiation belts, exposing them to radiation equivalent to 20 years on Earth in just a few hours. This exposure and tests during and after will interest NASA and SpaceX, which will want to establish man, moon, and eventually Mars colonies. The mission also plans a spacewalk at an altitude of 470 miles, 756 kilometers, on the third day. Commercial astronauts will undertake this spacewalk for the first time, and it will also mark two other significant milestones. Not only will it mark the first for SpaceX, but it will also mark the first time Crew Dragon has carried out a spacewalk. Additionally, it will mark the debut of SpaceX's new extravehicular activity, or EVA, spacesuits, which are an upgrade from the current intravehicular activity spacesuits that have been used on all other Crew Dragon space flights. Similar to Apollo and Gemini, Crew Dragon lacks an airlock, necessitating all astronauts to don pressurized suits as the spacecraft depressurizes and opens up to space. As early as a few hours into the flight, the entire crew will have to start pre-breathing steps to reduce the amount of nitrogen in the blood and reduce the chances of decompression sickness. This entire crew will have to be cleared of motion sickness or nausea, especially with 3 new astronauts with no space experience on board. The risk of nausea inside a spacesuit could endanger the astronaut's life. Isaac and Gillis will be the ones performing this spacewalk, with each having an opportunity to conduct a 15 to 20 minute spacewalk each. SpaceX hopes that the Polaris Dawn's first test of the SpaceX Starlink laser-based communication system will pave the way for future space communications, including those to the moon and Mars. SpaceX could potentially enhance the volume of data transfer and collection during a spaceflight using its Starlink constellation satellites. For example, when SpaceX used the Starlink for communications during the Starship test launches, it successfully delivered the first ever re-entry transmissions during what is typically a communications blackout. Polaris Dawn is considered a part of the space commercialization and space tourism industry, primarily serving the ultra-wealthy and their chosen companions. People frequently view this as a personal vanity show, mirroring the perception that early commercial airplane flights were exclusively for the wealthy. Polaris Dawn, on the other hand, is advancing space science and practical applications, making it critical for SpaceX and other future commercial carriers to understand the limits and capability and safety in space. Polaris Dawn does go beyond exhilarating experiences of Blue Origin's New Shepard launches, as it incorporates real-world practical applications and exposes the crew to increased risk during and after the flight. This is also a risk for NASA because if Polaris Dawn has a catastrophic failure, it will lead to the grounding of Crew 9 for an investigation. And with the last mission failure of Boeing's Starliner, NASA would have to start hitching rides again to the ISS from the Russians.